Hello everybody, welcome to third class of IELTS Speed Up offered by Thompson School. Today we will focus on listening part 3. First, we will go through the overview, common question types that you may have in your IELTS listening part 3, and of course tips and strategies for each question type. Then you will go through sample question types we will practice together. Then you will be able to see the explanation of answers, and of course at the end of each practice you will be able to see keyword table. Okay, so you should keep in mind that starting from part 3, conversations in IELTS listening will be set on academic context. So what does that mean? You can imagine situation, university professor discussing assignment or project with student or several students, or simply students discussing project among each other. Okay, common question types in IELTS part 3, multiple choice, selection from a list, and flowchart completion. Okay, you should keep in mind that in contrast with part 1 and 2, part 3 is more complicated. So minimum number of correct answers is 7 or 8. Okay, let's start tips and strategies. First of all, you should manage your time wisely if you have multiple choice in part 3. After finishing part 2, you will be given time to check your answers, and if you manage your time wisely, it is better to spend this time on analysis of multiple choice questions, because usually multiple choice questions take more time. And next tip is highlighting keywords, not just from the questions but also from the options. And when it comes to the next tip, you don't have to write the first answer you hear. You should keep in mind, in IELTS listening, they will always try to confuse you. Okay, and of course the next tip is very useful and important. You don't have to spend too much time on one question. So in multiple choice questions, they will go through each possible answer. So that's the moment where many IELTS candidates may get confused. So if you're not sure, it is better to move to the next question immediately. Leave it for the end. And of course, you should be careful whenever you hear words like but or however, because these words are clear signs that speaker is about to change their answer. And of course, practice makes perfect, but not simply practicing, but you should work on your weak points every time. And of course, your answer is going to be a letter, not a word or phrase. So let's start practice. So here you have multiple choice sample practice. First, you should analyze the question and potential answers. So what will be the main topic of Trudy and Stewart's paper? So you have to identify the topic, title of the papers that they are going to write for their university or college project. So option A, how public library services are organized in different countries. If these students decide focusing on the differences of public libraries in different countries, you will choose option A. So option B, how changes in society reflected in public libraries. So if they decide to focus on the influence of society on public libraries, you will choose option B. And the last option, how the funding of public libraries has changed. So funding is all about money. Okay, so let's start.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 23.
Okay, Stuart, we need to start planning our paper on public libraries. Have you thought of an angle yet?
Well, there's so much we could look into. How libraries have changed over the centuries, for instance, or how different countries organise them. What do you think, Trudy?
Maybe we should concentrate on this country and try and relate the changes in libraries to external developments, like the fact that far more people can read than a century ago, and that the local population may speak lots of different languages.
We could include something about changes in the source of funding, too.
Yes, but remember we're only supposed to write a short paper, so it's probably best if we don't go into funding in any detail.
Right.
So the answer is B, because she mentioned that they have to focus on this country and relate the changes in society and public libraries. When Stuart offered or proposed topic about funding, she mentioned that it is better not to focus on funding in details. And they just mentioned how it's organized in different countries, but they didn't focus on it well. Let's move to the next question. Okay, they agree that one disadvantage of free digitalized books is that. So students should identify the negatives, so drawbacks of free digitalized books. Digitalized books means e-books or electronic books that you can access through your computer or mobile phone. Okay, option A, they may take a long time to read. If they mention that this method is time consuming, you will choose option A. But you should keep in mind that it says they agree. So both students should agree on that idea. If at least one of them rejects it, the answer is going to be incorrect. So B, they can be difficult to read. I think it's clear. And the last one is they are generally old, meaning that you won't be able to find latest information in these free electronic books.
Well, shall we just brainstorm a few ideas to get started?
Okay. We obviously need to look at the impact of new technology, particularly the internet. Now that lots of books are being digitalized, people can access them from their own computers at home.
And if everyone did that, libraries would be obsolete.
Yes.
But the digitalized books that are available online for free are mostly out of copyright, aren't they? And copyright in this country lasts for 70 years after the author dies. So you won't find the latest bestseller or up-to-date information.
That's an important point. Anyway, I find it hard to concentrate when I'm reading a long text on a screen. I'd much rather read a physical book. And it takes longer to read on a screen.
Oh, I prefer it. I suppose it's just a personal preference.
Okay, the answer for this question is C, because Stuart mentioned that free digitalized books that you can find online are out of copyright. And copyright in this country lasts for 70 years after author dies. So you will not be able up-to-date information. So up-to-date means latest or new. You cannot find new information, it means this is old. And Trudy confirms this, saying that's an important point. However, when Trudy mentioned that reading online books or e-books takes a lot of time or difficult, Stuart actually said, no, I prefer it. So they didn't agree on that. So the answer is C. Let's move to the next question. Okay, Stuart expects that in the future libraries will. So keyword here is Stuart. We should focus on the idea of one of the students. And in this audio, we have two speakers, Stuart and Trudy. If you find it difficult to differentiate between them, you should keep in mind that Stuart is a male student and Trudy is female. So, what he expects from libraries in the future, what he thinks about them in the future. Okay? A. Maintain their traditional functions. Maintain means keep. So they will have the same functions they have today. Okay? B. Become center for local communities. I think it's clear. For local people, so they can organize some events there. And the last one, no longer contain any books. Contain means have. So he might think that there will not be any books in the future. Let's see.
It's not preference.
I expect the libraries will go on evolving in the next few years. Some have already become centres where community activities take place, like local clubs meeting there. I think that'll become even more common.
I'd like to think so. And that they'll still be serving their traditional function. But I'm not so sure. There are financial implications after all. What I'm afraid will happen is that books and magazines will all disappear and there'll just be rows and rows of computers. They won't look anything like the libraries we're used to.
Well, we'll see.
So the answer is C, because this idea was mentioned by Trudy and Stuart said, I'm afraid that all magazines and books in libraries will disappear and there will be rows and rows of computers instead. So the answer is C. In the following slides, you can see the script of the audio and see the answers. Okay? So, it's here. And of course, we have keywords table. So, changes in society reflected. The phrase that you have in your booklet is given as relate the changes in libraries in the audio, or no longer contain any books, that is in your booklet, given as books and magazines will all disappear. So next question type that we will focus today is selecting from a list. Okay, first of all, you should remember that you should look at title if you have it. Otherwise, you start reading instructions. Choose 2 letters. It means out of these 5 options, you should choose 2. And of course, which 2 problems affecting organisms in the splash zone are mentioned. This is the question. You should analyze question and potential answers carefully and keep in mind that both question and answers will be paraphrased. Moreover, you should remember that in the audio they will mention all answers here, so you should listen for the gist. And of course, you should be cautious when speakers tell you the answers but then take this correct answer away. You should be ready for this trick. Okay, if you are ready.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30.
So, 2 problems. splash zone.
Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
So, here in the options we have lack of water, lack of food. So, what does that mean? Lack of something means shortage. So, you don't have enough. Lack of water means they don't have enough water. Or lack of food, they don't have enough food. Strong winds. You probably know what is a wind. Okay, high temperatures, so when it's too hot. And of course, large waves that you have in the ocean or sea. Okay?
Now, when we get to our findings, I thought we could divide them up into the different zones we identified on the shore and the problems organisms face in each zone. So for the highest area,
The splash zone.
yeah, we found mostly those tiny shellfish that have strong hard shells that act as protection.
But not from other organisms that might eat them. Predators.
No, that's not the main danger for them, but the shells prevent them from drying out because they're in the open air for most of the time.
Right. And since they're exposed, they need to be able to find some sort of shelter or cover themselves up so they don't get too hot. Then in the middle and lower zones nearer the sea, we need to discuss the effects of wave action.
Yes, and how organisms develop structures to prevent themselves from being swept away or even destroyed by being smashed against the rocks.
I haven't done anything on the geological changes. It's not preference.
I expect the libraries will go on evolving.
So the answer is D and E because speakers mentioned that they have shelters to protect themselves from exposure to high temperature. Okay, when it's too hot. The answer is D. And the next one is they should learn reaction against large waves. They can be swept away or even smashed against the rocks. So the options are D and E. So question number 29 and 30. Here you have to choose two letters from A to E and which two reasons for possible error will they include in their report. So students should choose two possible errors they may have. Okay, A. Inaccurate records of the habitat of organisms, so living area of organisms. Next, influence on behavior of organisms by observers, so person who is observing these organisms may affect these organisms. And C is incorrect identification of some organisms. They may identify certain species incorrectly. And D, making generalizations from a small sample. Okay, so they may focus on small number of organisms and consider these statistics as true for all of them, which is very serious mistake in reports. And next is missing some organisms when counting. So I think it's clear. While they are counting, they may forget or ignore certain species. Okay, let's listen.
We weren't concentrating on that. Maybe we need to find some websites.
Good idea. I've got the lecture notes from Mr. Blake's geology course, but they're too general. But we could ask him which books on our reading list might be most helpful.
Right. Okay. Now, I did a draft of the section of sources of possible error in our research, but I don't know if you agree. For example, the size of the sample and whether it's big enough to make any general conclusions from. But I thought actually we did have quite a big sample.
We did. and our general method of observation seemed quite reliable, but we might not be all that accurate as far as the actual numbers go.
Yeah, we might have missed some organisms, if they were hiding under a rock, for example. I wasn't sure about the way we described their habitats. I decided it was probably okay.
Yeah, and the descriptions we gave of the smaller organisms, they weren't very detailed, but they were adequate in this context. I'm not sure we identified all the species correctly, though.
Okay, we'd better
I expect
mention
the libraries
that.
will go on evolving in the next few.
Okay, so speakers mentioned all options as you thought, and when it came to generalizations, students mentioned that the size of their sample was okay, and they might have missed some organisms when they were counting them, and of course incorrect identification of some species. So answers are C and E. Okay, in the following slides you can check out the answers by looking at the scripts. Okay, and of course here you have keyword table that you will find really helpful. See, high temperatures in the audio is given as get too hot, or inaccurate is given it was probably okay. So negation of the word inaccurate. Okay. Next question type is flowchart completion. Probably the easiest question type that you may have in IELTS listening part 3. So tip number 1. So you don't have to listen for details. So you should focus on keywords and the type of the words that you should write in the gap. Okay, next, highlight keywords in each stage of the chart. Keywords should be nouns and subjects in the sentence and possible verbs. Okay, it is very important that you look at the grammar in the sentences, because even grammar mistakes will be penalized in this question type. Okay, for instance, in question 1, the article A comes before the gap. This tells you that the answer will be a noun or noun phrase. So analyze questions carefully. Almost everything is given to you to help you out. Okay, next, decide how many stages there are in the flowchart and listen for sequencing, for order of the language, and of course always be aware of which stage the speaker is on, because you may skip the answer without realizing it. Okay, here we have sample practice. Choose 5 answers from the box and write the correct letter. So you are given gaps and possible answers. You should simply put the letter. Okay, select seats of different something and size. Okay, measure and record something and the size of each one. Decide on something to be used. Okay, let's start.
Hear the rest of the discussion. You have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
Anyway, shall we have a look at the procedure for our experiment? We'll need to get going with it quite soon.
Right. So the first thing we have to do is find our seeds.
Okay.
I think vegetable seeds would be best. And obviously they mustn't all be the same size. So how many sorts do we need? About 4 different ones?
I think that would be enough.
So speaker mentioned they should have different size of seats and sorts, which is perfect synonym for the word types. So the answer here is G. Okay?
There'll be quite a large number of seeds for each one.
Then for each seed, we need to find out how much it weighs and also measure its dimensions.
So next step is finding out how much the seed weighs. So here we have weight and measure its dimensions, meaning that they should measure the size. Okay?
And we need to keep a careful record of all that.
That'll be quite time-consuming. And we also need to decide how deep we're going to plant the seeds, right?
So next step is deciding how deep they are going to plant the seeds. So here we have the word depths. Let's move to the next part of this flowchart. As you can see, I put a line through the answers that we have already used. Okay, question number 29. Use a different something each seed and label it. Label means mark it. Okay, after about 3 weeks, record the plants, okay, something, and the last stage is investigate the findings. Okay, let's listen.
On the surface, a few millimeters down, or several centimeters.
Okay, so then we get planting. Do you think we can plant several seeds together in the same plant pot?
No, I think we need a different one for each seed.
Right. And we'll need to label them. We can use different colored labels. Then...
So the answer is F, because speaker mentions that they can use different colors to label the seeds. So let me cross out the color as well. So next.
You wait for the seeds to germinate. I reckon that'll be about 3 weeks,
Okay.
depending on what the weather's like. Then we see if our plants have come up and write down how tall they've grown.
So write down how tall they have grown. Okay, the answer is E. Okay, height. Okay. So in the following slides, you can see the script and compare your answers. Okay. And of course, keywords table. And I want to focus on the last one. So how tall they have grown. Okay. Here in your booklet, you have height. Okay. Or how much it weighs is given as weight in your booklet. Okay. Thank you for your attention, guys. Let's move to the most important part, home assignment. Your home assignment for this class is going to be completing 40 tests, part 3 only. Okay, you will use 40 listening practice books published by Thompson School. And of course, again, check your answers and prepare a keyword table for each test. And listen again and analyze your mistakes. Never ignore your mistakes. Work on your weak points. And of course, translate and learn the words. Try to enrich and improve your vocabulary. Thank you for your attention, guys. See you next time.